So this is a PG-13 presentation. Please counsel your younger children about the dangers of QRP operating and how addictive it is. Ham radio is just a gateway to QRP. But it's extremely addictive. It's way too much fun. So what is it? Well, in the Morse code days, when everything was sent using what we call CW or Morse code, they came up with a bunch of shortcuts to communicate operating challenges. You've heard some of them. QRM means man-made interference on the channel. QRN is natural interference, like lightning crashes and noise and things like that. QRP means, can you reduce your power? And QRO means, can you increase your power? That's what that means. And it means in this design, you can send those three characters pretty quickly instead of saying the CANYOU, etc. So that's what it is at shorthand. Today, what it means is, generally speaking, it is low power operating. And it's usually considered 20 watts or less. Sometimes it's around 10 watts. Sometimes it's around 5 watts. It just depends on the radio and that kind of stuff. Now, I want to put that in perspective for you. How many of you have a night light somewhere in your house? Got a night light? Remember the old incandescent night lights? Now you probably got LED night lights. But remember the incandescent ones? You screw this little bitty tiny bulb in there? That's 7 watts. We're talking around the world on a radio with the amount of power that runs a night light. Okay? So anybody tells you, I don't understand radio, nobody understands radio. But radio is magic. And if you can talk around the world on 7 watts, it is just a yes kind of movement. It really is. It's an endorphin rush. So anyway, we talked, generally speaking, when we're talking about power, QRP is 20 watts or less. What we call barefoot is a standard 100 watt or 200 watt rig. Whatever comes with the rig, there's no external amplifier, we're not boosting it up or something like that. There's a lot of gray area, but that's what we mean. And the QRO is a high-powered, meaning you're running a 500 watt amp, 1,000 watt amp, 1,500 watt amp, or if you're a CB operator, 5,000 watt amp. But anyway, QRO means high power. Okay. QRP is just way too much fun. So when I get finished tonight, y'all need to stay out of it and leave it to the rest of us professionals. No, I'm just kidding. I'm going to turn this one back on while we're talking. Some of them have been timed out because they've been sitting here for a while. All right, typically portable. Think parks on the air, think summits on the air, think islands on the air, think Walmart's on the air, think porta potties on the air. They're typically portable operations where power is at a premium, you're operating off batteries, that sort of thing, and so you're operating QRP. It is not the same thing as taking a 100 watt rig and turning it down to 5 watts. For example, a 100 watt rig, an ICOM 100 watt rig, will draw between 4 and 5 amps of power in receive mode. And so if you go out in the field with 4 or 5 amps all the time, even before you're transmitting, and you can light up the finals and all that kind of stuff and draw several more amps, even though you're not transmitting much, technically it's QRP because you've dialed it down to 5 watts or 10 watts, but it's not exactly the same thing as operating portable with a radio designed for low power operation, okay? But you can do it. If you want to experiment with it and play with it at home, that sort of thing, the first thing you're going to find out is your antenna system that you have at your house is crap. Because you got 100 watts that you're playing with and you're overcoming all kinds of limitations in your antenna system, and when you try to operate that thing at 5 watts and you find out that the only person that can hear you is the blue jay crapping on your antenna elements, then you start to get serious about radio. And you start looking at antennas and feed lines and are your connections dirty and all this other kind of stuff. I'm just telling you, everything counts. Everything counts. You resent every adapter that eats 0.1 dB. You just resent it. And so you start figuring out how to get efficient and it becomes an obsession. It's just awesome. So anyway, I was a new ham. It was the bottom of the cycle, and I dreamed of power amplifiers. This was my very first HF radio. I still have this radio. This is an ICOM 7000. It's a shack in the box, so it does HF 160 through 10 meters. It also does 60 meters. It also does 6 meters VHF. It'll do 2 meters VHF, and it does 70 centimeters UHF. It is an unbelievable radio. People fight over these things on eBay. I paid $1,200 for it back 12 years ago. They're still $1,200 today, used. And the fact that we had a ham here named Bill Kruger, may he rest in peace. We called him Mr. PVC. He saw my radio. He ended up buying 3 of them. They're just awesome, but they're 100-watt radios, and it's a design for mobile operation. In fact, on one of my Lexuses, there's an NTSC video jack out of the back, and I wired it into the navigation screen on the front of the car, put a bypass plug on the parking brake, and then I could drive along and operate and tune the radio and have the display in front of me. Lexus found out about it and re-engineered their car so I couldn't do it in later versions. Okay, it probably wasn't me, but anyway, that's what I'm saying. It's a beautiful radio, it's strong, and I went around saying stupid things like, life is too short for QRP. I said a lot of stupid things when I was early ham because I heard stupid things from more experienced hams that also were not experienced in whatever they were mouthing off about. And so I would repeat them as if they were gospel. And I'll come back to that in a little bit. Life was too short for QRP. Okay, so I thought I wanted more power. So I dreamed of a linear 1,500-watt amp that I was going to have to run power in from the box, which I'd have to put a new breaker box in because the breaker box didn't have enough amperage in it, and I would have to run 220 into the room. And these were the kinds of dreams that I had as a young ham. More power. That's lack of maturity, here to admit. Then Andy, KE5KOF, he's also a member of this club. He's a good friend of mine. He bought one of these. This is a little bitty box. It plugs into USB. It's made by Flex Radio. It is a software-defined transceiver. It runs 5 watts. But it requires a computer. So you notice there's no knobs on it. You have to plug it in. It runs 1 slice. But it introduced me to software-defined radio. And it's a phenomenal radio. It's very, very small, very lightweight. It's not exactly miserly on the power consumption, but anyway, it's 5-watt radio. So I got hooked on pan adapter displays. Anybody seen a pan adapter, sometimes called a waterfall? You see a slice of frequency, you see the signals dancing, and then there's waterfall underneath it. And it's kind of like that old saying, once you've had pan adapter, you never go back. And so any other radio tuning around is challenging because I'm wanting to visually see signals and click on them and go to them and all that kind of stuff. In fact, Andy and I put together a program that we presented to the club, how to take a regular HF reg and turn it into an SDR with a pan adapter. And we did it on a Yaesu FT3000. You can do it on other radios. And we told people how you can do that. You don't have to buy a new radio. You convert it to an SDR. So I bought the Flex 3000. 100-watt, great big pizza box in a steel shell. This thing would support an Abrams tank. And it was 100 watts, but it had all the same features of this little Flex radio, except that you could run 4 slices at the same time. I'm sorry, 2 slices at the same time. Pick any 2 slices of spectrum, 192 kilobits apart, and run 4 different radio receivers in each slice at the same time. So you could have digital going, CW going, you could have phone going, you could have another digital mode going, you could look at beacons, you could do all that kind of stuff at the same time. And it connected using FireWire, which turned out to be a problem as Windows got older and older and older, so I sold it. Well, recently, I got a call from a ham on behalf of another ham who had one of these that was wanting to donate it, and so I now have another one. I did not bring it tonight because it's not a QRP radio, but I have this thing and it's back on the air. It's an awesome radio. Okay, so I helped Andy and others get their radios up. And I got them up on HRO because it was tricky getting that software connected to ham, Radio Deluxe, HRD, sorry, and getting the PSK interfaces going for digital modes and all that kind of stuff. It was not trivial yet. Virtual audio cables, virtual COM port splitters, it was a bunch of stuff. And Bill Kruger, again, he bought one, and I helped him get his on the air and get connected to everything. But they're big pan adapters, so that kind of sunk me into pan adapters. And I may have sneered at 5-watt radios. If all you had was a 5-watt radio, it was like, what is that? That's a CB or something. Much to my everlasting shame. Then Walt Mayfield, who was a big name in amateur radio at the time, was changing jobs, and he needed to unload some radios, and he sold me this. And this is a QRP radio. This is a Yasu, it's actually how they pronounce it, Yasu. 5-watt shack-in-a-box. So it does 160 to 10, including 60 meters. It does 6 meters, it does 2 meters, and it does 70 centimeters. It has 2 antenna connections, a B and C in the front and a regular SO connector in the back. It's a little power hungry. It is a favorite of the AMSAT crowd, the amateur satellite crowd. You'll see guys with 2 of these slung around their necks, one for receive and one for transmit, so that they can tune, especially on the linear translating birds, where you're having to adjust the frequency continuously as the bird goes over to account for Doppler shift. It's not so much on the FM EasySats. It has an internal battery, which is pretty sad, but this came with an upgraded WinCamp lithium-ion battery. I've added more features to it. It had a plug that would plug into an iPhone at the time. You could do PSK and other digital modes directly into this from an iPhone. It was pretty cool. It's been replaced recently by the FT818, simply a parts issue. The 818 went up to 8 watts, and I heard recently it's been discontinued. The 818 didn't add anything to it. It's got the same, this is it right here. This is the puppy right here. I'll get it turned back on here in a second, but I'll get it turned on when you, by the time anybody wants to come see it. No, battery didn't run down. It's plugged in. So this is a radio. It's a very, very tiny display. It's related to the FT857 mobile radio and the FT897, which is a desktop, mobile, portable, kind of big honking radio, except it doesn't have any filters. So it's useless if you're going to run it in a field day environment or something, because it'll get swamped by everything that transmits, but it's great for a little field radio. And this is used all over the world for people that were climbing mountains to do summits on the air, because they could do VHF, they could do UHF, they could do HF, they could do everything in one little radio. So this got me into QRP, but the bug hadn't really bit yet. So Andy and I were walking around the Plano Ham Fest, and we were talking about portable operations, and we're talking about doing some things other than the once a year field day sort of thing, kind of what George is talking about, doing more stuff. And we ran across another radio. Now this radio is so ugly, it's cute. I mean, you've seen that, right? You've seen stuff that was just so ugly, it was just cute. Okay, this radio is so ugly, it's cute. I don't know what its major malfunction is. It's just to be plugged in, but there we go. And I turned the display red just for grins and giggles. Okay, so then I ran into Hamcom. Oh, it was an Irving, Mudageddon. If you were a ham back then, you remembered that it was at the Irving Ham Fest at the Irving Convention Center. People parked across the street. It rained cats and dogs. We had to have probably a dozen vehicles towed out of the mud. It was miserable, miserable, miserable. And there was a company there that I had never heard of called ELAD, E-L-A-D, from Italy. Oh my goodness. Oh, she's so beautiful. She's Italian. She looks like a Ferrari. Just look at those lines. Oh my goodness. Well, she is HF only, but it's a full SDR, and it's a laboratory grade frequency stability. So it has 146 megahertz on the back, and it's a darling of the transverter crowd because they're going to multiply that signal up by 10 or 20 or 50 to get into the gigahertz. So 1 hertz deviation at this end, at the radio, will be 50 to 100 hertz deviation at the top end. And so it's got to be precise, and this one is, and they still make this thing, and that's been, gosh, 9 years ago. It was the first SDR radio that had a front panel. So you can operate on one slice and one frequency and tune it and plug it in. It has no speaker. You plug in headphones. Works great. But if you plug in USB to it, you can run 4 slices, 16 different radio receivers, all at the same time on this radio. She is just unbelievable. And she will do up to 8 watts. That's this one here. Oh, look, just. It's very simple to get on the air, unlike the flex radios, which are a beating to get all the parameters and everything set up. This is easy to get on the air. It has lots of accessories. And I started to learn about other things that I didn't know about. RF gain. So, one of our friends was a lawyer down in Highland Park. His name was Dave Holliday, still a ham. And he decided he would buy one of these. And Bill Kruger tried to help him. And they could not get a signal. They could not get a signal. Everything they tried, nothing. And so what do they do? They called me. So I went over to see them, and I figured out that there's an AM broadcast station in Highland Park, and the thing was completely swamped. And if you looked in the upper right-hand corner of the display, it said OVF, overflow. The A to D converter was completely swamped. Now, there's ways to fix that. I bought the optional preselector and put some filters and stuff on it, but they didn't have that. And then I learned, well, if you take the RF gain, you've got this noise right up here on the pan adapter display, and you begin to turn the RF gain down, all of a sudden signals begin to emerge from the murk. And you keep turning it down until the signals start to go down and stop. And now you've got all kinds of signals that you can hear. And because at that time I was still an immature ham, and I believed if a radio had a knob, it should be turned all the way up. Whatever it was, RF gain, I don't care. It's everything that's full clockwise, right? And so I began to realize that there were reasons for these other knobs, and RF gain was one of them. And so this helped me with my operating skills. As you get into QRP, you will find that you will learn to be a better operator, or you'll die. And I mean, you'll get frustrated. It's just going to happen. But wow, I was in love. I still am. I even got a hard case. She doesn't have to live in a soft case where she might be bumped. Okay, so I was okay for a while. What did I have? I had an ICOM 9100 base unit, which is a shack in the box, plus 23 centimeter. It does D-Star satellite. It's 100 watt barefoot radio. I got a Pactor modem. It has its own internal sound card. I've got it remote control software where I can bring it up on my iPhone or a computer anywhere in the world and connect to it and operate from it. And then I did the SDR upgrade to it, so I can just see all the signals and click on them and do what I want to do. And then I still had my ICOM 7000, and I still have it, and it's in a Go box, and you'll see it at Field Day. You would have seen it at Winter Field Day. I bring it up. It's my transportable. And then I had a radio in the park event rig, which was the ELAD, the FTM Duo. And then I had the AMSAT and pedestrian mobile rig, which was the FT817 that I'd wear around on a strap and walk around and do HF and that kind of stuff. So I was in good shape. You know, I had enough radios. Enter the Chinese. The Chinese came out with this. Now, they had come out with several other radios, and they were all cool and everything, but I wouldn't have anything to do with them because, I don't know, they were Chinese, and I didn't see any benefit to them and all that kind of stuff. But then they came out with this. This is the G90. You can still buy this radio. This is a 20-watt radio. This one has a battery. This one does not. The G90 does not. You have to plug it in. Also, it doesn't have an internal sound card or any of that fun stuff. It is just a radio for CW or phone operation, voice operation. But it is unbelievable. It has a 10-to-1 antenna tuner built into it. So you take this to a park, throw a wire in a tree, and you're on the air. Don't worry about measuring the wire. Don't worry about all that sort of BS. Just hook it up and go. It has, if you want a sound card to do digital mode, you got to plug in an adapter, a bunch of wires and crap like that. But that's a pan adapter. It's real small, but it's a very usable pan adapter. It has a spectacular receiver. It's a single slice, single frequency. The tiny, tiny, tiny speaker on it, which is on top, is not too good. What guys do is they use a PVC elbow, and they stick it over this thing to direct the sound forward so you can hear it better. They use a headset. The front panel's detachable, so you can put it in your car, put the front panel someplace, and you can drive around with it. It has some weird build quality issues that have got better. There is an optional 125-watt amp, because people that get into QRP for the first time think, I'm going to get this and I'm going to buy an amp just in case I need more power. That's immaturity speaking, and you don't want to do that with this amp, with this radio, because this radio is right on the ragged edge of FCC compliance for spurs. And if you plug an amp into it, you will not be in compliance. So this radio is by itself, but I take this radio to the field. I take it to a park. I have busted state QSO parties all over the country. I've busted the Russian state QSO party back before they were pariahs. I have talked all over the world on this thing with 20 amps, and I get 5.9 signal, true 5.9 signal reports. It is an incredible radio, absolutely fantastic. This radio makes me smile. I take this radio out, and it just makes me smile. It's so easy to use. It just works, and they still sell these. Ham Radio Outlet and other places, they still sell them. $445 for an HF 20-watt QRP radio that you can talk all over the world, but it's HF only. And then Xiegu strikes again with the 6100. Oh, that's this one right here. See, I turn it back on maybe. There you go. Nope. Didn't hold it quite long enough. Come on, boot up. So what this is, and it turned out, we didn't know this when it first came out, this is a radio with a, basically a Raspberry Pi as a controller on top of it. And so guys figured out that you can update the software on this by putting the software on a flash card and plugging that in and turning the radio on. It'll run the bootloader on the flash card and upload new software, new firmware into the radio. So somebody said, well, if it'll do that, I bet you it'll run a whole different operating system and a whole different user interface. Yes, that's exactly right. So the first thing they did is they brought it up and tried to run Windows on it. And it ran, but that's not a really good use of it. Then they found out you can run the entire FT8 suite on the radio. You don't need a computer. It'll decode. It was already decoding PSK and CW and RIDI, but you can run FT8 and FT4 on the radio. And if you don't like the user interface or it's buggy, just turn the radio off, unplug the card, turn the radio back on, and you got the factory software. Unreal. This thing is just so cool. Now the audio speaker on this one's not all that good, you know, works better. It still has that same incredible 10-to-1 tuner in it. Get the pan adapter, it's a lot bigger. It does up to 6 meters. It will also do FM, so it'll do FM on 6 meters as well as the single sideband and everything else. It will go up to 10 watts. So if it's plugged into external power, it'll go to 10 watts. Otherwise, it has batteries in it, and it will run 5 watts on its internal batteries. The internal batteries are stupid. They're small, flat packs. You got to take the radio apart when the batteries go bad. Don't like it. Don't last very long. 3.7 volt flat packs. I just plug it into external power, and then I'm 10 watts, up to 10 watts, and I'm off to the races. But you can also, it has Wi-Fi, and you can connect Wi-Fi to it. It has an internal sound card, and you can run the internal sound card over Wi-Fi, or run it into USB with a USB-C. And it also has a USB host port, and you can hook a keyboard up to it. So if you're decoding radio or something like that, and you want to type in your messages, you can type them in on a keyboard. It'll support a mouse. I mean, it's a Raspberry Pi, basically, running there, so you can plug all those peripherals into it. It runs Android. It'll run, I think the guys they were running Raspbian, I think was the one that most of the developers are starting to use now. So it is a fun radio. It is a fun radio to take to the field. I really like it. And right now it's getting cranky. I hope my big battery box is not failing on me, but anyway. It's got a few quirks, but Xiegu listened. And so just like on the G90, there were about 8 or 9 versions of software that added tremendous different functionality, fixed things. They were on the boards. You never heard from them, but they were on the Facebook groups. They were listening to what people said. They were making changes and putting software and firmware changes out. So it's very, very cool radio. I really like it. It's a lot of fun. So the fact that you can run FT8 right on the radio, you can go to the field through a wire in a tree with a 10-to-1 tuner and get on to FT8 with no other equipment is pretty awesome. I mean, it really is. Okay, fun to experiment. Then, disaster struck. The 6100 smoked. I was dizzy. I had the shakes. I had anxiety.
Was I there when this happened?
I had panic attacks.
I think I was.
I was depressed. I couldn't sleep. I sent it off to Jerry at Connect Systems, and he sent it back to Xiegu, and he said he had been waiting 8 months, and he hadn't got any of them repaired yet, and I would probably never see the radio again. I still have palpitations thinking about that period of my life. It was terrible. And then there was a British guy over in Arlington that had one for sale. So I beat him down on the price. And I drove all the way to Arlington. You know that from Farmers Branch. You got to hang extra water skins on the radiator and food and stuff like that, you know, if you're going all the way to Arlington. And I went and I got it. So I was skipping, I was dancing, I was back in the parks, making it happen. Back on FT8, the world was awesome again. The trees turned green. It was amazing. Blue skies were smiling on me, and then they sent the original back repaired. Now I had 2 of them. Oh. So anyway, I finally pried my cold dead fingers off of one of them and sold them at a ham fest. And this one's been running great ever since. So anyway. Now, then came the strange world of preppers. So there was a guy at an online ham fest called PrepCom. Can you imagine that they might be preppers? And so what he thinks is there'll be no government, and so nobody will be enforcing the rules and stuff like that. And so he came up with a single band 40-meter CW machine. And it comes with a keyboard, it plugs in, has no operating system, and all it does is transmit CW. About 5 or 10 watts. That's all it does. And decode CW. It's got a fabulous decoder. Like these other radios will decode CW. This one won't, but these other ones will. And so the theory is if the SHTF, and then you'll be able to reach other preppers on 40 meters by using CW on this little thing. So naturally I had to get one, you know, to see what it was all about, because you know, nobody needs this thing. However, he changed it to where it has 3 different blades in it. And you could get 3 different bands in the same box. Well, alrighty then. He was running a show special. Buy it with 2 bands, you get the 3rd band for free. So I bought one. So I have the 3 bands, 80, 40, and 20. I think he's come out with some other ones. You can have any one of the 5 standard bands, three of them at a time in here. And the other thing that's cool about it, though, is if you're not a CW operator, you can plug the audio into any radio, and then plug the key in any radio, and it will decode the CW that it hears from your radio right there on the screen. And as you type on the keyboard, it will buffer and send through the key interface CW on whatever radio you have. So it's a cool little appliance as you're learning Morse code, learning CW. So anyway, I have that little puppy. He's over here. And you can see it, the light's flashing. He's listening to everything we say, looking for CW to come up. So now my addiction is confirmed. I've got all these things. And I've got more radios than I could possibly use. And I thought I was safe and I could be seen in polite company again. Until I walked in the ham radio outlet. And my buddy Andy had bought an ICOM 705 and he wanted the overpriced ICOM case for it. And we walked into ham radio outlet and they had one of the cases for it. And they had the radio for sale. So he runs over to Robert and he says, how much for the case? And Robert says, can't have the case. The case goes with the radio. And by that time, Andy was unzipping the case and it had all kinds of stuff in it. An antenna tuner and the antenna box from Comet and all kinds of stuff in there. He said it all goes as a package deal. So Andy came over with his tail between his legs and put the thing back up there, and I shouted across the store and I said, Robert, how much you want for this crap? And the first 3 numbers are too high. And so Robert and I made a deal. And it was about $2,000 at retail worth of crap that I got per grand. So that's the ICOM 705. That is a shack in the box. And it will do HF, 60 meters, 6 meter VHF, UHF, VHF, and D-Star digital. It decodes RIDI, but doesn't decode CW. And it operates on a battery pack that operates on ICOM's hand-talkies. Same battery pack. Or you can plug it in. It's 5 watts and 10 watts, 5 watts on the battery pack, 10 watts on the on external power. It's a very, very good radio. It's got a much bigger screen. Since I'm kind of an ICOM guy anyway, thanks to Dale, the controls and everything were very familiar, and what you want to do, how it operates, the philosophy of operation, dual passband tuning, and all that kind of stuff. Very, very good radio, and I'm still learning it. It also has Wi-Fi. It also has Bluetooth. Also, will take a keyboard. It's very much like the 6100. The big advantage it has over the 6100 is it's got a battery, it's got D-Star, and it will do 2 meter and 440 on it. Okay? So, what can I say? Robert made me a deal I couldn't refuse. So now that added to my collection. And then the Russians. And the Russians stepped up with the Lab 599 TX500. It's all mode, all singing, all dancing, 10-watt remote control support with weird connectors on them. Very, very thin. Only draws 100 milliamps on receive. Very slick, very cool radio. And I was seriously looking at this one right up until they invaded Ukraine. And when they invaded Ukraine, they screwed up my #1 favorite antenna analyzer company, which was Rig Expert, which I, even though Rig Expert is now back on the air, I still haven't forgiven the Russians for that. So I haven't bought one of these, but I might. We'll have to see. HRO has a stack of these things that they haven't been able to get rid of.
So you're not cured yet?
No, I'm not. Now, usually Tom Yenny is here, and so he brings by his Elecraft, which is an SDR radio, little bitty thing. It is not an SDR. I'm hooked on SDRs. The software-defined radios, the received quality is just insane. You can pull signals out of the noise that you can't even see on the pan adapters. I'm hooked on pan adapters, and I'm hooked on software-defined radios. This is an old school one, But I bring it around to show you there are other things. There's radios in a can, you know, the Altoids radios. There's the Mountain Topper series, the QRP kits radios. There's other ones out there and stuff. I don't really have time. I got plenty to play with, but I'm just saying there's other stuff out there. But anyway, K5LOL, he loves it. And then Xiegu announced the X6200. Oh no. Oh no. That one is now about to go on sale. It's got its FCC approval. All the stores are waiting to get them in. It replaces the 6100. And the main feature that it now has removable battery packs. So you don't have all that foolishness with the internal lithium-ion batteries. It's pretty much the same. Still has the 10-to-1 automatic antenna tuner. It's still all mode up to 6 meters. It still supports remote control. We're not sure yet whether you can boot another operating system and run cool stuff, but it looks like they put FT8 into it in the factory firmware. And so this thing, it also picks up aviation band receive, wide FM broadcast, although that's still a pretty crappy looking speaker. So I don't know, nobody's seen one of these in real life. You can still hook up Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, keyboard, a mouse, got cat control, it's ICOM cat control. Internal sound card, should hit the dealer shelves this summer. And I don't know, I might put my 61 up for sale and buy that one. I don't know, but I probably will.
So why did you smoke the 6100? How?
Something was loose inside of it and it shorted out the battery pack and the magic smoke came out and I took it apart to see what was wrong with it. It burned the main board. If it had just been a component, I'd have replaced it, but it burned the main board, so it wasn't really repairable. Okay. So that's QRP, and this is the life that is in front of you if you go down this road, but it is so much fun. And you don't have to have this many radios to play. But that's my presentation. Anybody has any questions, or if you want to come up and see any of this equipment afterwards, you're welcome to do so. But thank you all very much.